Good morning. Hi guys. Good morning. I'm just going to wait a few seconds and just to see if anyone logs on. But if you are joining us this morning, just want to say good morning. And if you're watching, just say hello. And there's only my second time doing Facebook Live. So if you are watching us, say hello, and I will try and kind of keep up with everything whilst trying to organise my own thoughts and say hello too. So, hi Melissa, good morning. Glad to have you with us. So I'll just give it a few more seconds. Hey Deborah. And just whilst I'm waiting, I just thought I would just share a kind of an off thought with you. When I was asked to share the psalm this morning, I hate videos. I don't like being in front of the camera, but I decided to anyway, just because it kind of gives me that pressure, if you want to call it that, just to dig into the word just that little bit deeper. And I think I've probably got about 3 or 4 pages of notes on this, and it always amazes me every single time where you can read just a tiny little bit of scripture and yet get so much from it. And every single time I feel the same way. I'm just like, wow. And I was just thinking about something that Jamie Haxby shared yesterday about a theology kind of study program that the Bible Project are doing. And hopefully, if that is of interest and you are looking to study your Bible that little bit deeper, dig a little bit deeper into theology, perhaps we can just get the link put into the comments later today, and you can see if that is of interest to you. It might be, it might not, but I'd certainly encourage you, like I guess I've done with this, and need to do more often, just to dig that little bit deeper, as it can be so fruitful. Hey Jack, hey Samuel. Jack, I hope Ruben is watching too. If he is, say, Big Uncle JJ says hi. I'm sure Amy will appreciate that too. So this morning, let's say we're looking at Psalm 10, and in the commentary just before the Psalms in my my study Bible, as it's kind of describing the Psalms, it just says that they express the emotions of believers as they are stirred by the thought of God and the developments in life of faith. It covers feelings of things like joy, pain, fear, confidence, doubt, hope, and despair, all expressed with piety and reverence, but honestly and boldly. And I hope that I can portray this, because I definitely see it clearly myself as we look into Psalm 10. And what I will do is I will read that to you, and I will update this later, so it's on the post as well. And then I'll kind of just go through my comments or kind of thoughts. So Psalm 10, it starts with, Lord, why do you stand so far away? Why do you hide in times of trouble? In arrogance, the wicked relentlessly pursue their victims. Let them be caught in their schemes that they have devised. For the wicked one boasts about his own cravings. For the one who is greedy curses and despises the Lord. In all his scheming, the wicked person arrogantly thinks that there is no accountability, since there is no God. His ways are always secure. Your lofty judgments have no effect on him, and he scoffs at all his adversaries. He says to himself, I will never be moved. From generation to generation, without calamity. Cursing, deceit, and violence fills his mouth. Trouble and malice are under his tongue. And he waits in ambush near settlements. He kills the innocent in secret places. His eyes are on the lookout for the helpless. He lurks in secret like a lion in a thicket, and he lurks in order to seize a victim. He seizes a victim and drags him in his net. So he is oppressed and beaten down. Helpless people fall because of the wicked one's strength. And he says to himself, God has forgotten. He hides his face and we will never see. In verse 12, it goes, Rise up, Lord God. Lift your hands. Do not forget the oppressed. Why has the wicked person despised God? He says to himself, you will not demand an account, but you yourself have seen trouble and grief, observing it in order to take the matter into your own hands. The helpless one entrusts himself to you. You are a helper of the fatherless. Break the arm of the wicked, evil person until you look for his wickedness, but it can't be found. The Lord is king forever and ever. The nations will perish from his land. Lord, you have heard the desire of the humble. You will strengthen their hearts. You will listen carefully, doing justice for the fatherless and the oppressed, so that mere humans from the earth may terrify them no more. Hey Josh, morning Jill, hey Ollie, Chris, and I think that's everyone. So wow, so there's a lot in that. And then I feel that in contrast to the Psalm 9 that we heard yesterday from Jamie, rather than kind of starting with praise and the kind of confidence of justice, Psalm 10 starts with despair and concern that injustice seems to be rife and that God is not interested. It starts with, Lord, why do you stand so far away? And why do you hide in troubles? And when we see here with the kind of question of why, we can really see that kind of signal of despair and frustration. And in this tiny bit alone, I don't know about you, but I can so relate to that. And I'm going to say relatable a lot in this, because just throughout the whole psalm, I just feel that it's incredibly relatable. And sometimes I think we can often ask that question ourselves, where we can feel that God is just at a distance and far away, even when we know he is not. And that, I don't know about you, but for me, that is often in times of frustration, or in times of tragedy or trouble, or perhaps, I've just had my head down in work for so long where I haven't openly sought to look for God in the Word as much as I would normally, and I just feel that there is this distance between him and I, even though I know that not to be the case. But here we go on to read about this kind of perceived success of the wicked and the righteous anger that David's feeling in this. And it kind of makes me think of two questions that I both have had myself, perhaps still have myself to a point, and have been asked in different situations. And I think they're quite common questions. And the first one being is, why do bad things happen to good people? But here, the second one, it sits kind of closer, where we think, why do good things happen to bad people? And God knows we have these questions. And you kind of really get a sense here of David's kind of worry and concern that this injustice has taken place. And I can't think of anyone that probably won't be able to relate to this at the moment, especially in view of all the tragedy and kind of bad things that we see happen around us, and that lament that we have on our hearts. And we ask, where we say, where is justice? Justice, I think, or the requirement for justice, sits so deeply within our hearts, points only to the fact that we have been created in a way that we see that the natural conclusion to an injustice happening is that justice is served. And we see that locally, nationally, internationally, at the moment, with the cries of the Black Lives Matter movement and various other tragedies and things that are taking place. We have that built within us, that kind of cry for justice. And I'm sure if you ask yourself kind of what situations have either taken place or are taking place in your lives, these feelings can be stirred up. We would all have a list. the lists might be somewhat different, perhaps different in priorities or an urgency, but connected in that sense of an injustice taking place and the need for justice. And so David goes on to talk about the kind of the success of the wicked and his cry. And then in verse 12, he shouts out, Lord, rise up. Lord, lift up your hand and do not forget the oppressed. God, protect us. He cries out through all of this injustice for God's protection. But in verse 14, he goes also on to recognize that God is present, despite sometimes us feeling like there's a distance. God is ever present, and recognizes that God sees the actions of both the wicked and the cries of our heart within our grief. In verse 15, he says, break the wicked one until it says, break the arm of the, and in my version it's the apologetics, it says, break the arm of the wicked, evil person until you look for his wickedness and it can't be found. And I don't know about you, but I don't physically see God coming down to earth and snapping someone's arm for this, but I feel like this is David really seeing God's heart within all of this, rather than just saying, God, serve your justice. He sees God's heart in terms of, I don't know, maybe you read this differently, but I see this request being put forward, like, put this person through the refinement process until the wickedness is taken away, rather than just the person. And then he kind of goes on to affirm his certainty when we see in verses 16, 17, and 18 of that God is King of all, forever and ever, the nations of all the nations, and that he knows that justice will be heard, served, and that our hearts will be strengthened and our concerns heard. And I guess just to briefly kind of, I guess, summarize, we kind of see this relatable concern where David is crying out for justice to be served. He sees all this wickedness around him, and that during this difficulty he feels this distance of God, where he says, God, where are you? But we also see that affirmation or reaffirming of and recognition that he acknowledges that God is there and that God recognizes our grief and the injustice being served. And you might be thinking, well, so what? And you might not be thinking that, but when I'm looking at this and thinking, well, what does that mean and what can I take away from this? I wrote down a few things that I'd like to share with you this morning, and I hope that they offer something to you, or perhaps just give you some things to ponder. And these are in no particular order of importance, but things that we can perhaps consider anyway. And so the first thing is, he's crying out, where are you, God? And I feel that whilst this is written in despair, perhaps we can also consider it as a question, where we can say, where are you, God, in this? So when we are going through trials, where we are going through things or seeing the tragedies around us, we can ask where God is in this and look for God actively, rather than just cry out in despair. The second point is just that, again, that justice is this kind of, or the need for justice is this condition of the heart, and being served, justice being served when an injustice has taken place, is this natural thing that God has designed and built within us. Next one is just wherever we find ourselves, whether it be in the tragic situation, post or pre, or wherever we are, we have to sit in that trust and firm belief that wherever we are, God sees us and the things that are happening around us. He is bigger than our situation. The next is, even with going back to verse 15, even with the wickedness and the success taking place, there's a moment here where I feel, where whilst the cry for justice is being put out there, we also have that reminder that actually we need to cry out. We need to have a prayer where we don't just think, God, help me get through this situation, but we need to pray for all that are around us, even the ones where we feel that are kind of serving out the injustices, and that God's justice will take place. And that might not always look like we want it to look. And then lastly, we can rest in, if not physically, in the knowledge that we look to a one that is bigger than our personal problems, but also the problems that are going on around us, in society. He's bigger, and long term, his justice will be served. And we just have to have the trust and the faith to go through the fire and know that whatever trial is being put before us, it is God's will, and that it can be used for his purpose. So I guess that's my thoughts for the morning. I hope I've said it clearly enough. If not, then please let me know. I'll try and kind of clarify things in any comments, or if anyone has any comments, I'll try and read through those through the day. I always feel sorry for anyone looking at me on camera, because I hate the camera. It kind of puts me off a little bit, but I guess God can use this for me, if not for you too. So I hope you have a great day. It's Friday. I hope you have a great weekend, and I hope you found this useful. So thanks for listening, and God bless, guys. Bye.